Hello, everybody. Hi. Welcome to Book Passages Conversations with Authors. I'm your host, Paula Farmer. Thank you for sharing your afternoon with us. We know you have lots of virtual event options as well as work and family obligations. So we definitely are appreciative when you spend some of your day with us, especially a lovely middle of the week afternoon. We promise you a special event that's well worth your time. And we also appreciate your support by buying today's book, buying other books through Book Passage and independent local bookstores. We really are available for you to come in store in San Francisco or Corte Madera. Feel free to call us and a bookseller can help you, or online. We're just available all over the place, such as the times we live in now, right? So we have a very special event as mentioned, and I want to remind everybody, all the audience members, that we welcome your participation through questions and comments in our chat. And we will get to those. Well, it's kind of up to the authors. They can decide if it fits in during their conversation, or they will wait closer to the end of the event and present your questions. But definitely feel free throughout the event to make comments and to ask questions, and we will definitely address it. The first time Ravi Shankar was arrested, he spoke out against racist policing on National Public Radio and successfully sued the city of New York. During his 90-day pretrial confinement at the Hartford Correctional Center in Connecticut, he met men who shared harrowing and heartfelt stories. The experience definitely taught him about the persistence of structural racism, the limitations of mass media, and the pervasive everyday life traumas. His book, and our featured book today, is called Correctional. It's a memoir, and it dives into the inner workings of his mind and heart through the lenses of race, class, privilege, and as the son of a South Indian immigrant. Ravi is an award-winning author, editor of more than 15 books and poetry collections. He is the founder of Drunken Boat, one of the world's oldest electronic journalisms of art. And he has been featured in the New York Times and on NPR, the BBC, and much more. He joins us from Rhode Island. In conversation with Ravi is Nick Flynn. Nick's book include This Is the Night Our House Will Catch Fire, and 3 previous memoirs, as well as 4 volumes of poetry. He is a professor at the creative writing faculty at University of Houston, and he joins us from Brooklyn. So we have East Coast and West Coast represented today. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you, Paula. It's great to be here.
Thanks, Paula. Ravi, thanks for asking me to be part of this. Congratulations on the book. I know the book won't appear in physical form for a while because of supply chain issues, but I guess people can get it on Kindle right away, right? They can get it immediately. Yes, I have only read a PDF of it, so I'm looking forward to holding the actual object in my hand. It's a beautiful book, and it's a complicated book too. There's a lot going on there in it, and you really sort of lay out a period of your life. I mean, it focuses like most memoirs on a very particular period of your life, probably from we say 2010 to 2020, like that chunk.
Yeah, I mean, I think that much of what happens 2008 to 2014, but it does move kind of chronologically backwards and forwards, and younger childhood self. But yeah, much of that, that period.
Yeah, I love those. Yeah, that's the sort of central thing where things were going sideways in many ways in your life. But yeah, I do love the background stories where it bounces back to your childhood in was Manassas. Is that where you grew up in?
Manassas.
Manassas. You say Manassas, I say Manassas. And then even back to like a good amount of time in India, right? Like there's like a chunk of you going back to your what would you call it, your ancestral home, or your...
Yeah, it would be where my parents migrated from Chennai, known as Madras back then. Yes, right. This kind of rupture just when I was in third grade, in the middle of assimilating into this life in Northern Virginia, I was uprooted, and we went to take care of my grandmother who was ill, and I lived there for about 18 months, and then moved back to the U.S. after having had this experience, which felt very magical to me, and I think made me feel even more apart in some ways than I was already made to feel by virtue of being the only South Asian family in Manassas.
Yeah, it seems like many of the places you go, like you would stand out, like you would be like in Connecticut. Where in Connecticut were you teaching? You were
Central Connecticut State.
Yeah, so there probably weren't a lot of people that looked like you there either.
Right? Yeah, I mean, where we lived in Chester, it's a lovely town. It's 2 hours from New York, but man, what a cultural difference. Totally much more homogenous, and still a little puritanical. There are some lovely people, still people I'm really connected to, but yeah, I think that my story probably wouldn't have had the notoriety in any. I mean, I have a friend who writes for the New York Post, and he was like, "This, you had a misdemeanor, right? This stuff wouldn't even make the back page of any."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That it was. You were I think you were the only faculty member of color, at least in your department, right? You were, which is, congratulations on that. On being like, getting tenure at a young age and sort of being a tenured professor, and yet things it was a tough thing too, like at that moment, because all these other things are happening in your life, which you lay out. I was thinking of having you read a little bit. I broke the book down into many sections that I really loved. The language is really gorgeous, and then there's the language, and there's the references. I'm seeing a James Baldwin reference here, and then there's the stuff that's happening, that's going on in your life, and there's your sort of looking back on it and this beautiful thing. So let's read that passage, the passage on the three poisons.
Okay. Yeah,
would that be okay?
Yes. And I'm glad we're kind of reading this, because in a way, I mean, I feel like your own work uses this kind of fragmentary, almost prose poetic style in conveying. And this period, I mean, the Three Poisons is really the compression of everything that was happening, which is really complicated and was difficult to explain. And so I decided to use these kinds of snapshots. And so I'll just read you the very beginning and the first three of these little creatures. This is the beginning of chapter 4, The Three Poisons. Though my parents are devout Hindus, Buddhism has always had a greater resonance with me. Perhaps because it's more of a philosophical investigation into the nature of reality than a religion per se. In Buddhism, the Trivisa, or three poisons, refer to delusion, greed, and hatred, which are the leading causes of dukkha, or suffering. In Tibetan art, the forces that drive us are represented at the center of the wheel of life as three creatures: the pig, delusion; the cock, greed; and the snake, hatred, spinning round and round in an inexorable cycle, each one endlessly biting the next one's tail. They're driven in mad pursuit of the one in front, while being consumed by the one behind. In such a way, my own days were consumed. I was eaten from within by all the forces I chose not to see, which might explain how, as a fully grown man, tenured professor of English in Connecticut, I might come to suffer from all three. The pig. Indians are often stereotyped as sneaky, shrewd, mutable. Perhaps to survive in a country of more than 1.2 billion people, you need to leverage some sort of evolutionary advantage over others. Parker, it's my ex-wife, never understood this, but I was raised to believe that if you can find a way to get free cable or cut in line, why not? In my family, there was always some sense that our vegetarianism, our Brahmanism, our family bond of fervor for education, while not making us better than other people made us different. Truth be told, that kind of difference might as well be an euphemism for better. Never mind the ways in which we might actually be worse. Appa certainly felt this way, even while he looked down on others for being dirty and derelict. He filled his water cup with soda at the fast food restaurant and encouraged us to sample grapes at the supermarket. My own reflexive, thoughtless behavior over the years might have derived, initially at least, from the pathology of those Brahmin supremacy constructs, from the dual sense of deprivation and entitlement they provoked. Privation on the one hand, gluttony on the other. As Atul Ketkar, spokesperson of the Chittawan Brahmins, insists in his documentary film Jai Bin Comrade, his caste, which is my caste, is superior because of the uniqueness of our genes. Plus, it's often the case there's the scripture for subjugation. The ancient Rig Veda claimed that society was one unified body, breathed into being by Brahma's divine manifestation and composed of different classes of people intended to do different tasks to keep that body healthy. When you feel that way, you feel like you can get away with anything because everything is due to you. Though almost universally condemned as racist, the remnants of the caste system, which relegated individuals into a stratified social hierarchy, remains in place in parts of India. Shrouded in pre-modern ideology, its origins are murky, but its racist implementation over time is clear. My lineage, the Brahmins, were the priests, the lawmakers, the mouth of the collective body. The Kshaitra, the warriors, the nobility were its arms. The Vaisya, the farmers, moneylenders, artisans were its thighs. And the Shudra, who served as the tenant farmers and servants, were the feet, laborers barred from such activities as studying the Vedas. The taxonomy left out a great number of people who were born outside the caste system. These were the Dalits, or untouchables, who lived under the feet of society, doing such jobs as dealing with sewage, disposing animal carcasses, and cleaning out latrines and funeral pyres. The echoes of Jim Crow are evident. Dalits were forbidden from attending the same temples, drinking from the same cups and chai stalls, or even wearing shoes in front of someone from an upper caste. Brahmins were an embodiment of purity, untouchables, pollution. Even when this pernicious form of social organization was outlawed by the Indian Constitution of 1950, the discrimination didn't cease. Dalits were prevented from voting, had their property stolen, their houses burnt down. Sometimes they were made to parade naked in the street, or forced into prostitution, or compelled to consume their own excrement. In 1989, the country passed the Prevention of Atrocity Acts to outlaw what had remained commonplace in parts of rural India. Stupefying in a modern democratic society, it took the enactment of legislation to prevent people from forcing their neighbors to literally eat their own shit. When Michelle Alexander describes the American criminal justice system, she compares institutional racism to the Indian caste system, writing it is fair to say we have witnessed an evolution in the United States from a racial caste system based entirely on exploitation, slavery, to one largely based on subordination, Jim Crow, to one defined by marginalization, mass incarceration. While marginalization may sound far preferable to exploitation and may prove to be even more dangerous, extreme marginalization, as we've seen throughout world history, poses the risk of extermination. Take a sociologist and a scholar to measure the similarities and untangle the differences between the two systems of oppression, but the root of both is the fear and demonization of the other, a conscious or subconscious effort to exploit difference to one's personal advantage. Appa grew up in a family where the resonance of the caste system was still in the air, if not spoken about explicitly. From the west coast of South India to the American East Coast, he carried with him a false sense of purity and genetic superiority that he passed on to his children. Perhaps because he was not accepted by them, he felt that most Americans were lower caste. And in some ways, as desperate as I was to assimilate, I suppose I did too. The cock. Growing up with Amma and Appa, I never got an allowance like the majority of my friends, which meant I had to beg to get those things I felt were so essential back then. G.I. Joes, Star Wars action figures, BMX bike, classic Air Jordans, parachute pants. Due to his penuriousness, it was useless to ask Appa for anything. But Amma, she could be a little more malleable if I appealed to her kindlier nature. I will cajole and whine, wheedle and cry until finally on my birthday or Diwali, the Indian New Year, I finally get one of those longed-for toys or faddish articles of clothing. By then, though, the trend would have inevitably shifted and moved on to Atari and portable Walkmen, leaving me a few steps behind in my parachute pants. When I turned 13, I was allowed to get a job. I would traverse the neighborhood on a huffy BMX, chucking copies of the Journal Messenger on the lawns. However, even in this instance, I was not allowed to keep my salary. Instead, I had to donate it to help pay for family expenses. It was a policy that didn't exactly increase my keenness to wake at 5 a.m. to deliver papers. What it did do was increase my longing for those forbidden items I couldn't buy, even with the money I had earned myself. Still, there was a trade-off. Thanks to Appa and my status as the eldest and only son, I never had to wash a dish. I'd eat and magically my plates would disappear and reappear for my next meal, clean. I'd spill pencil sharpener shavings all over the shack carpet and abracadabra, they vaporized when I left the room. Much to Parker's chagrin, I went to college not knowing how to operate a washer or a dryer, let alone an iron. It was certainly not Appa, the house's resident magician, doing this conjuring, but I was too self-involved to notice how hard Amma worked to keep the household together. I know now that my parents did the very best they could, framing the American dream through immigrant thrift. But back then, despite being coddled, I grew furious that my basic liberties were being denied, that I was being caged from the siren call of sensation. I craved all that I missed, all that I thought I was missing more and more. I never wanted for anything growing up, but still, I wanted everything. The snake. When I used to get mad, I yelled and broke stuff. The Shankar household gave me plenty of opportunities to kick walls and snap my hated glasses. If only I could have foreseen in those clouds of rage that Amma would just tape them up and force me to wear them to school anyway. The unfairness of my life would descend on me in such moments like a demon's scaly wing. I had plenty at which to seethe because my requests were not over the top. I wanted to go to the shopping mall, watch MTV. I wanted to try a hamburger or go to prom, get my driver's license. Yet these aspects of normal American teenage life would set Appa off. Gee, 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 he would exclaim, making a cackle of disgust. Why do you want to do such dirty things? Stay at home, study, set a good example for your sisters. But I was already a good student. I'd entered and won contests I hated entering and winning. I would have still rebelled even if Appa had been more reasonable. But being given only stern prohibitions made me go berserk. Under cover of night, I break littered beer bottles in the cul-de-sac to blow off steam. So the first three, so that section kind of cycles through these, each one kind of reflecting on that aspect and what was happening in my life as my life got kind of more and more gnarled and complicated at that time.
Yeah, in those years. It's interesting things. It says lay out the these three poisons. Do lay out. You map them onto this idea of the pig being delusion, the cock being greed, and the snake being hatred, and then tying that into the caste system, the Indian caste system. So you guys are at the top. The Brahmins are at the top of the caste system, and then the dukkha. Is it dukat? The untouchables?
The Dalit or the untouchables.
The Dalits. I'm sorry. Yeah. Dalit were the untouchables, which is so interesting because part of your story does seem to be like a sense of having a sense of exceptionalism, being from the upper caste, but then transplanting that into the United States where it doesn't really have that. Oh, we have our own caste system, as Isabel Wilkerson sort of I love that book, Caste, points out that it sort of comes from the same thing, our system here. And so there's exceptionalism that you're carrying, but also this sense of marginalization, like being outside of the group. So there's this sort of, it's almost becomes like psychologically like a lethal cocktail in some way. To have both those running side by side, which does seem to justify in some way your relationship to the law, after your initial, being arrested for under false pretenses. But then after that, there's the trauma of that, of the initial arrest for, under false pretenses. And then after that, though, your relationship to the law and to crime for that period of time, which landed you in jail.
Yeah.
And it does seem like you do wrestle with that. You're sort of turning that over and over, like how from the whole cultural thing coming up, like having this sense of exceptionalism, but also not being a part of it, trying to be part of it, just deciding. Maybe just say something like how these things, how even those three things, like delusion, greed, and hatred, how they manifest. Maybe talk a little about that, how they sort of manifest into what happened.
Yeah. Well, I think that throughout the book, I'm poised in this way where I'm kind of both part of the community and not. Certainly that was the case when I was at Hartford Correctional, where I'm someone who's benefited from enormous systems of privilege, and yet I'd face discrimination on the basis of the color of my skin, like some of these other men. I think that when I came back from India after those 18 months, and my parents, of course, they wanted me to have a auspicious return, and so how they did that is they took me to a Hindu temple to get my head shaved, which didn't really help returning to elementary school. And I found, though, that when I was being kind of mocked or teased in some way, I could draw upon this experience that I had, that these boys from Manassas who probably never even left the state could relate to, and that sense of being somehow special and apart from, and it's I cultivated, and I think that sense. Also, I felt like the identity I had to perform at home, because I loved my parents. They were kind and they were good people, and yet what they asked of me, I knew would have been social suicide. I couldn't be this Indian boy in an American school, and so I found that I had to kind of put on this face inside and outside of the school. And what it ended up doing to my sense of self, I think, was really complicated. And I think what it did is it made me secretive. It made me kind of nurture these hidden sides of myself. And I think that's part of what transpired at that time. And I always have been an anarchist, I think, in some ways, and a Marxist. I feel like there are things about capitalism that are just fundamentally incompatible with democracy, and they're yoked together in a way that conflates a lot of the problematic aspects of that pairing. But I think that I was the recklessness that I felt, and especially after this wrongful arrest, I think I was just more paranoid, and I think I was probably drinking more than I should have been. My marriage was falling apart. had moved from New York to live in this very sedate community, and things were going really well. I was the youngest tenured professor in Connecticut State's history, but I think it engendered some schadenfreude from some of my peers who felt like, oh, I'm kind of getting this too soon, and I haven't paid my dues, and I wasn't comfortable. I never really felt at home, and I think that all of those things perhaps conspired in that short period to make me make some very poor decisions.
Yeah, it does seem. It seemed like there was, as you read the book, as I read the book, it's like there's these beautiful passages where you're meditating on, the history, like the passage you just read, the passages, when you go back to India, near the end of the book, it gets very philosophical and very about forgiveness and about the, carceral state. And then there's the sort of the part in the center where it is like watching a slow motion car wreck, where there's this sort of thing. Is just no, Ravi, don't do that. No, don't do. Oh, definitely don't do that. Oh no, don't do this. There's these moments in the book where it's just no. Now, what, Ravi? There's this. It seemed like this demon rose up and sort of grabbed you, and it was some sort of very self-destructive behavior. I would say, at least how I read it. It just seemed like one of those things would have been enough for some people, not for everyone, or any one of those, one of the things that happened to you, I don't want to say happened to you, that you did. One of those things that you did, to sort of lay the responsibility where it belongs, would be enough for some people to be like, and the consequences you got from each one, at least that you, I don't know, maybe there were more things that happened that, that there were no consequences for, but each one that's laid out in the book, like it might be a thing where someone would be like, yeah, okay, this is the wrong path. But then you'd sort of double down and you would double down, and then it would get worse. The consequences would get worse until you ended up in jail. Like, it was like, it was really like hard to read in a certain sense, because it really was like, I've known you a long time. Yeah. And I was, I was asked to be on the board of Drunken Boat. I think maybe I was or not. I just said yes. I don't know if I didn't do anything for it, but someone I respect, someone I like, and then like this period of your life where just, I can't say we've all had these periods, but most people I know have had these periods where just suddenly the life gets turned upside down, and we turn it upside down ourselves. We take it and just shake it and just sort of decide, like, I'm going to burn everything down. Sometimes you get away with it without going to jail. I've been locked up a few times, like not for 90 days, but like, I've been done things in cars that like police have caused me to pull over and put me in jail for the night, And in those cases, I'm a white person in America, and it was in a town. So I would look back on it. At the time, I was very resentful, but I'd look back on it from any sort of distance, relatively quickly. It'd be like, they probably saved my life. Like, going to jail probably saved my life. Like I was on the wrong path, and it was like, once you go to jail, as you have amazing passages about being in jail in this book. And once you go to jail, even the brief time I spent overnight in jail a couple times, it was enough. Like, I do not want to do this again. Yeah. Like this sucks. Like this sucks really badly. And, I don't know if that's good or bad. I love if they should have like plush chairs in prison, should have like comfy chairs. And, there were no comfy chairs where I was, and it doesn't sound like they were where you were either. So,
no.
Yeah. So there's that whole thing too about, just about that, I think maybe something about like that self-destruct. You say at the end something like, maybe to talk about this a little bit, near the end of the book, you say this beautiful passage. I've always been more interested in the shadow, that part of ourselves that we are ashamed of, that we feel guilty about, the part that has a propensity to grow if ignored. The shadow is dangerous, primitive, irrational, reeks of the public laboratory, the taboo. If collectively we don't pay it the attention it deserves, it could swallow up an entire epoch. This is the place where shame might be productively used. Carl Jung has written that shame is a soul-eating emotion. And it is that for sure, but in its corrosive capacity, it can completely hollow us out, so that in the empty space cleared out, we have greater capacity for empathy toward those around us. Connecting with the part of ourselves we hope others don't see is to begin to dissolve the very mindset that harbors that hope in the first place. The process of learning to forgive ourselves, we can also forgive others. I thought that was a very beautiful passage at the end, but just about that, maybe say something about that shadow, interest in the shadow and how it transforms.
Yeah, I think that, and I don't know, and maybe I would have just skated along kind of, slightly unhappy in my job, in my marriage, and not really dealt with a lot of the things. Certainly, you're totally right. When it's the exact opposite of everything my parents as a model minority were hoping for, right, is to end up in jail. And they still, they were resistant to me kind of writing this book because, normally in South Asia and many cultures, you repress traumatic experience and you put it behind you and you don't kind of deal with it. This really was a kind of looking at myself clearly, and in so doing, and what I realized, and this is why I say it was a little bit of a blessing, this curse, this time of my life that was so horrible. It gave me a visceral understanding of what I knew theoretically about our criminal justice system and really how kind of broken it is. And it made me a lifelong advocate, I think, for criminal justice reform. And I think some of these things wouldn't have happened. I think it's made me a better teacher, certainly, and professor of writing, and of course I've had, since coming out, I'm teaching at Tufts now, and I have some great students, but I know very firsthand the difficulty of reentry that many of these men kind of go through after something like this. And it just made me feel like I was struggling with my own demons, and in so doing, it opened the door into our country's collective demons. And it felt like, okay, yeah, these are like my shadowy creatures. And yet here's the conditions of our country that should have us protesting in the streets. And yet we've allowed this to happen. We've allowed from 1980, when there was about 250,000 people in prison, to last year when there's over 2.1 million, a nearly like 1,000% increase in 30 years in our lifetimes, in modern time, and we've allowed it to happen. And, so I'm hoping that this book allows us to wrestle a little with that shadowy self as well. And shame is really, my partner Julie does a lot of work around shame as well, in bibliotherapy. And, I think of our criminal justice system, because much of the code and the laws are still steeped in the puritanical roots and the Calvinist roots of people who would want to punish others by publicly shaming them and using pillories and dunkings and scarlet letter, right? And we're meant to be a guilt-based society, but I feel like there's a way in which we really still kind of shame and blame, and maybe it's been exacerbated in this moment of social media and the like. But I know a lot of men, because I've been working, and women who I've been working with, who after they get out, they pay their debt to society. They're not able to move forward, and if they are, the reentry places are going to get them a job at Dunkin' Donuts or something. As they, I was just talking to this guy Dwayne, who said, I went in as this really complex individual, as a father, as an artist, and then when I get out, I should be thankful for having some minimum wage crappy job. It's like, there's no wonder people will head back out to the streets when that's the option. And so, I actually think we need to look hard at whether we're invested in a system that's intentionally broken, because you said the thing about plush chairs, and there weren't in Hartford Correctional, certainly, but I've seen some of these Scandinavian, Norwegian prisons that are pretty nice apartments, and yet they're equipping the people to be able to move forward with their lives, and their recidivism rate is like 6 times lower than what it is here. So, maybe they're onto something. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why one of the reasons I was very grateful to you to ask me to do this with you is because I'm definitely a strong believer in reforming the prison system and in restorative justice, and with having some forgiveness too, like having like someone who is sort of done their time to not to sort of have it follow them for the rest of their lives as something that messes up their lives from then on. I think it's a terrible thing, and you point out in the book, about the film the 13th, which is lays out that the increase of the carceral system in the U.S. Do you feel that, like, I'm not sure about this. I agree with all you say about like the conditions in U.S. prisons are abysmal. That it's privatized. It's been privatized. There's these corporations that are making money off it. There's incentive to have people in it. Do you feel in your particular case that you were treated unfairly for what you did?
Well, no. I can only put it into perspective. I nothing that I did really hurt anyone except for myself. I did get into accident when I had, this DUI, which I didn't actually accept to do the breathalyzer, and so I never actually got tested. But refusing a breathalyzer is tantamount to guilt. And then I was driving on a suspended license, and so 90 days is the same amount of time that the Stanford swimmer who raped an unconscious Chanel Miller had to do. So was I in that time? Certainly did. Have a pretty profound effect on me, but I don't think it was because of what was intended by that experience. When I was there, I didn't see any possibility of rehabilitation. And it's hard to say. I mean, yes, I wasn't following. Of course, I use this as frame it as a teachable moment for my daughters to say, your license is suspended and you're driving on it, and you think it's this minor thing. Well, violated the probation from this other thing, and I could have done 2 years. And so to only do 90 days, I think was probably a good thing. And I also had a private attorney who managed to space this time out over the course of 1.5 years, which someone with a public defender wouldn't have had. But the flip side to that, of course, is I wished I'd have done it all in one go, because each time you have to get processed, it's re-traumatizing, it's humiliating. You're reified into this object. You have to spread your ass cheeks and be given the task, and then reintegrate into this community in jail. Sometimes with people who definitely don't want to see you. So
you lay that out really well, at the sort of horror of sort of getting to know the folks in your cell. Or your stints were usually like 2 weeks to a month or something, right? Like generally.
Yeah, the longest the first summer that I described, I had to do 45 days, 45. And that was totally bizarre. And then I got on a plane to fly to Hong Kong to teach my graduate students there, and was having drinks with the ambassador at the top of the Ritz-Carlton, and then I got on a plane to fly back and do 2 more weeks at Hartford Correctional before the whole semester began. So that was, and no one really knew that was happening at that time, because the media coverage and everything really happened right when I was at the end of finishing off these 90 days.
Yeah. Is that when you got promoted to be a professor?
Well, I mean, I had really been promoted in the fall, because you have to go through the department, provost, dean, presidents, everyone had signed off on it, and I exceeded expectations in every area of evaluation. It just needed to get stamped by rubber stamped by the Board of Regents at the very end. But they were, it turns out, nominated by the Democratic governor, and it was an election year. And when this Republican senator turned Hartford Current columnist got a hold of it, it was a very juicy way to kind of score some political points and to say, poet and professor promoted while in prison. It was a very kind of juicy local story. And my misdemeanor offense, I think there were maybe 7 or 8 articles about me in the Hartford Current. I was on the evening news. They sent news vans and helicopters to my house. So that was really a very bizarre period.
Yeah. Like you say, like it wouldn't have even made the papers at all in New York City. It's not like it had something very particular to do with where you were, it seems, right?
I think so. And, I've subsequently found that other things I have this, I know this guy who's used to run the Yale Writers Conference, and he embezzled, $500,000. And, that didn't make any of the papers. There's a little note about it in the local law Tribune. But, and that was what kind of opened, this was kind of pre the whole fake news conversation. But I felt like that the way that I was being covered in the local journal with the local journalists was sensationally and inaccurately. And also, once a story had been established, there wasn't room for complexity or depth in the reporting. They just kind of they needed to continue to play to this image of me, as my friend said, as a wild animal escaped from the zoo, as this kind of reprobate who was, tainting the minds of the young people. That was very much how it was framed. And, when in the Hartford Current, I got all kinds of racist comments, like, go back in your your boats to the mud flats in Calcutta, all that kind of stuff. So it just brought it all out, actually.
Yeah. I just want to say to the audience, remind you all that if you'd like to have a question for Ravi or myself or both of us, I think there's a chat on the YouTube thing, and put it in, then it'll be transcribed over to our thing where we can see you. We're on Zoom, but somehow it goes to YouTube. We have something, Paul from Book Passage just said, made a comment. I'll just read that. Unfairness to prisoners and need for reform often doesn't take into account the many who were overcharged and or should never have been arrested, imprisoned due to racism, etc. That was her comment. So I don't know if you want to say anything about that, but
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that I'm hoping this book is not just a static literary artifact, but it propels us to take action in some way. I know that I have started getting engaged locally. We're the land of the free, but the U.S., which is accounts for about 5% of the world's population, has 25% of the world's prisoners. Right. And when you think about our tax dollars, I really feel like it's not a Republican or Democratic issue. It's this human issue because we are putting so much money into this system that's kind of broken. It's ineffective by any statistical measure. And we could be putting money into education, into mental health facilities, into all of these kinds of programs that would be, I think, much more effective. This rhetoric of public safety, I think, has masked a lot of pernicious things for a long time.
Yeah. What do you think? You would like to read? I could read another passage here. I have some things laid out here. I'm thinking where we should go with our conversation at this moment.
I'm glad to read it. There's somewhere else I could dip into.
Maybe on page 49, there's a bit sort of about the beginning, sort of like right after your arrest under false pretenses. The first thing is sort of, as you lay it out here, set off the next few years, the rough patch you're in. It's on page 49. It starts with the effect on me was not readily apparent.
Okay.
49. So can you find that?
Yes, I got it here. Yes.
Yeah.
So this is right at the end of course, I initially, and I detail this, had this wrongful arrest on an erroneous warrant. And this comes right at the end of this chapter. So.
And that seemed clear that the arrest and the erroneous warrant seemed, clearly a case of racial profiling. You were pulled over. Racial slurs were thrown at you. You were pulled over. You didn't match the description at all of the person who the warrant was for. So that was sort of the beginning, just to lay that out for people. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And that was in New York City.
That was in Midtown Manhattan. Yeah. Right, in Herald Square.
Under Bloomberg was the mayor, I think. At that point.
And I think a lot of this stop and frisk policy was since found to be unconstitutional. But many innocent New Yorkers were stopped under this policy. The effect on me was not readily apparent, but in time I would discover that I'd grown jittery and insomniac after that fateful weekend, that a nameless fear had imperceptibly unhinged me. I would act more compulsively than I had before, subconsciously taking an exit off the highway if I saw a cop car behind me. I found myself looking at Hispanic and Caribbean guys with greater empathy and men in uniforms with unearned anger. This was my first real brush with the criminal justice system. I would never have believed you if you were to tell me that in this short stint would foretell a greater intimacy with its modes and apparatuses in due course, and that my true disgrace and the irreparable harm to my reputation and social standing would in fact arrive much later. Back then, I only knew that I was made to feel alien in one of the few places I've ever considered home, New York City, and that it stung. Just as my own story was gaining notoriety, I felt perhaps even more intensely than since I was a child, foreign to myself and ever more foreign to the world around me.
Yeah, it's a beautiful passage. And it's maybe something about that. There's something, one thing I want to say is, I hope that the harm is not irreparable. At the time, I understand it being here, but I think, I think this is part of the repair is you with this book coming out and you sort of like just being in the world and sort of the literary world sort of like opening their arms and sort of saying like, welcome back, because it has been a hard time. And then this idea of this foreignness again, sort of like that, that marginalization and exceptionalism, but also just then foreignness comes in, just feeling not like fitting in some way, coming back into this again. That sort of comes back, as a child, you felt that for various reasons, being, from another culture in, Virginia, which I've never been to Manassas, but it just sounds to me like it wouldn't be welcoming in some way. And I've never been to Manassas. I've been to Virginia. But yeah, that sense of like foreignness, and then having to sort of come back again to you, like even more strongly once somehow it's a thing, like, we do things, things happen, we sort of learn from them. We, we do things as consequences to what we do. Sometimes the consequences seem appropriate to us. Sometimes they seem excessive. But then in yours, it was also, like you said, like the layer on top of that was the spotlight put on it too. Like it wasn't like a thing that was in private. So that's like the shame coming in too. So that's sort of feeding into that whole, that thing. I wonder about that, like something about that.
Yeah, I mean, and I felt it keenly in this, I lived in this small town, my ex-wife still lives there, and it's a lovely town, and I was already stood out because I was half the population of color. There was one other guy, was me, and then when this happened, I mean, it was really my daughters that I felt really bad for going to school there, because it was this odd feeling where you're walking in the street and you feel the heat of everyone's eyes on you, and then you look up and no one will meet your eye. And it's like, and certainly when you're on, television, and, the guy at the local bar is like, wanting to kind of bring it up. And and the powerlessness with which, because my attorney had told me at that time to not say anything. That's what you're counseled to say. And so you literally lose your voice, and you have people speaking for you throughout the course of the legal system. And, I mean, that was what I found, that these problems in terms of the racialization and kind of brokenness was not just in the carceral system, but in the legal system as well, because there were vastly different sentences. My defense attorney was a former state prosecutor, and he told me, they negotiate behind bar. Give me this guy, a couple years off this guy, and then, as if these human beings are, playing cards or something. And it's really kind of sickening in a lot of ways.
Yeah, Paula has another question for both of us. I'll put it out there. On a very practical level, how can we inspire a more open-mindedness and forgiveness by society toward prisoners who have served and are integrating into society and are in the workforce? It seems common for people to judge, make assumptions, or be fearful of former prisoners. Do you want to sort of like give some practical ideas about that? And I'll jump in after if I have anything.
Really great question, Paul. And I think, there's this phrase that's used in hiring a lot of intentional inclusion, right? Intentional inclusivity. And I think that just as we are including people of gender difference and neurodivergence and all kinds of different backgrounds, that when we already know the statistic that, 1 in 3 Black men in America will be arrested, and that almost 3% of the American population is in a prison or parole or probation at some time, that we are actually actively trying to help some of these people. And, there's one thing, and there's also this gulf between deed and rhetoric. I'll just mention, I mean, I'm really happily teaching at Tufts. I was teaching a few classes at Bryant University last fall, right at the beginning of the pandemic. And I was happy to be hired. I did all my background check, and they wanted me to go in person. So I was lecturing with a mask in front of everyone. And a couple of days before the next semester was to begin, and I'd gotten excellent evaluations and everything, the chair said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, human resources said, because of your background check, you're not allowed to teach." And so, well, I guess I was allowed when my body was able to be put on the line earlier, but now for whatever reason I wasn't. And this year, Bryant University is, for their Day of Understanding, is reading Brian Stevenson's Just Mercy. So, these kinds of ironies, that it's not just in what we say and what we kind of like and tweet, but that actually, what I found is having a conversation with someone to find out their story and the nature of their charges, or they were really kind of human in a lot of ways. And there are a lot of organizations also that are doing this work. I mean, you might be familiar with some of them, Nick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Innocence Project is things is one that's out of Texas. There's just the idea of restorative justice, like and like I don't know, it is such a big thing. Like I believe Obama in his last years, he was sort of starting to dismantle the industrial the complex, the private prison complex. I think there was like moves toward that. I'm sure it didn't. I'm sure it just increased under Trump. I
talked to someone who was on that task force for 21st century policing, and they said they came up with a lot of really good recommendations, and that as soon as Trump came into office, they all got torpedoed.
Yeah, they're all gone. Yeah. It was like, it actually was a moment where just recognizing that we're just really far down the wrong path. It's a big thing. I'm not sure. It's not something that I have any expertise in figuring out how to do that. I mean, I've known a lot of people who've been in prison. I don't have the same feeling about a fear of former prisoners like you. I think that you've once you sort of talk to people and sort of see like pretty much everything that you talk about in your book, I'm like, oh yeah, I've done that. On some level, petty larceny. Getting involved in some scam that feels like it's a good idea at the time, and then like suddenly it turns out to be a really bad idea. Driving drunk, avoiding, like deciding like it'd be better to run away from a situation rather than sort of like facing whatever's coming, and passing fake IDs. I've done it all. I've done all of it. I mean, it's not like, so I didn't have some sense of like, oh yeah, this is bad. But like, I think it was like a thing like, that was the hard part of it. It's like that was the thing. We're like watching this car wreck, because it felt like yours were sort of bundled in a package of like, I haven't done those things while I was on probation. I think that's the difference for me. Like I wasn't on probation, and so like that would have scared me, I think, enough to be like, okay, I'm not gonna do this thing now. Like I'll spread them out over like a lifetime or something. So there was that level. That's an interesting thing about the book, is that there is this level of that self-destruction at that moment. Like really like knowing that, I mean, on some level, knowing there's these consequences, and yet like just sort of still sort of, making that choice in that moment,
and it's funny when you look back, it almost seems like it's a predestined in retrospect. I mean, in Sanskrit, they talk about these drishtis, these kind of cycles that take your life, and that you really have no will in. And you're right. I think I kind of had to like, I kept falling, and you think you hit bottom, and I kept falling through until I, really, I mean, I think once I was at Hartford Correctional, that was when I was like, holy shit.
Yeah. And then it did it. And what changed from that? Like what sort of came from that? Like when suddenly you sort of woke up at Hartford Correctional and were like, what change did you feel you had to make or something? Or
I did one thing. I have this great therapist. I realized that I really did need to take care of my mental health more. And then, I got real with the ways in which I was not really, being honest with myself with respect to my marriage, with respect to maybe some of my colleagues. And I decided that I wanted to devote myself to not just making myself better, but to kind of helping others. And that really the greatest way that I could rebound from all of this is to help others who are in a similar predicament in some way. And that's the kind of the Buddhist, the Bodhisattva mentality a little bit, that we're all suffering. And that's what I realized is I was really connected to some of the men that I met, and I never would have ever even talked to them on the street if it wasn't for this experience. And so having met them and them sharing their stories with me, I feel that's part of why I had to write this book. I see Paula coming back up here.
Yeah. I think it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing, though, that just what you said, just to jump on what you just said, like that, because it is like it seemed like there was some sort of humility sort of came in, like there's that, beginning with this sort of exceptionalism, and then like, through, a very difficult road to get there, but suddenly realizing like the connection to all these like larger humanity, like from this like book. I mean, I really took that from from reading your book, that's sort of like the sort of larger, deeper message from this. So, it does seem strange, like having gone through this, to sort of say like you're perhaps a better person on the other side of this. I mean, that's the feeling I have. I didn't know you so well before. I know you much better now through this book. And now, like, I'm glad to be here with you right now. I'm glad you're on the other side. So.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and we're definitely glad you're on the other side and that you both joined up for this. We really appreciate the information. I've had the honor of hosting several authors regarding prison reform for domestically and as far as immigration imprisonment as well. And it's absolutely a pervasive issue in our country. We are the most we do the most imprisonment than any other country in the world. And that still just astounds me every time I hear that. So thank you both. I think the more we can hear about this and hear practical steps for change, we're better off as a society. So thank you, Nick and Ravi, for writing your memoir. I think it's going to change so much for everybody. And this is the cover. It's not the book. I'm sorry to our audience. It's not the actual book, but I at least was able to print out the cover. It's a fabulous cover, and the content's even more important. And we will be getting the books in early January. It's slated for early January, but you never know with these print issues and shipping issues. It could come next week all of a sudden, Yeah,
we're hoping for the end of the year, even though it says January 4th. So
exactly. And right now, Book Passage actually has signed book plates. So as soon as we get the books, we're ready to put them in the books and get them out to our customers and those that have joined today or joining later on in the recorded version. Feel free to pre-order with Book Passage, and we guarantee you a signed book as soon as they come in, and we will expedite getting it out to you. Or you can come into the store, because our stores in San Francisco and Corte Madera are open, and we're taking in-person, online, and on the phone orders for this and all books. So please, we encourage our audience to support not only Book Passage, but local independent bookstores. And thank you so much to these authors, poets, for supporting Book Passage and independent bookstores by doing events like this. We really appreciate the conversation and your time.
Yeah, thanks, Paula.
Paula, it's great to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Ravi, great to talk to you, Ravi.
Nick, I miss you, man. I look forward to hanging out again. Thanks for great conversation.
Maybe